Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction House, and I'm taking a look at some of the guns they're selling in their December of 2015 premiere auction. And like sniper rifles are always cool. And you know, is there a country out there that has a better reputation for marksmanship and finely made military rifles than Switzerland? I don't think so. There may be some people that come close. I don't think anyone gets a better reputation in that area than the Swiss. So I figured we would take a look today at a Swiss bolt-action sniper rifle. Now the Swiss started experimenting with optics mounted rifles in the 1940s. Most people are familiar with their K31 carbines, which are still very common and pretty darn cheap on the market. And by the way, they are fantastic rifles, extremely well made, very accurate, great guns. Well, during World War II, the Swiss actually experimented with this interesting little periscope mounted optic on the side of K31 rifles. And they had a couple different versions. They had the K31/42 and the 31/43. They changed around some of the details of the scope. Well, those rifles didn't really work out well. The magnification was low. They were only like a 1.8 power scope. They were a little, the optics were very small. And I think they were actually a bit too fragile as well. They just weren't a successful trial. So it took a few more years, but what the Swiss ultimately ended up adopting was they kind of went the other direction. Instead of taking a standard service rifle and trying to put a scope on as unobtrusively as possible, what they did instead was purpose build a rifle using the same basic action as their service rifles, but beefing everything up to make it a really ideal sniper's weapon. So this is the ZfK-55. They were, of course, adopted in 1955. A total of 4,150 of these rifles were built. They have since been surplused and declared obsolete by the Swiss, which is why we have ones like this here in the United States. They can be purchased and they're available in many places. So the basic changes that they made, it's a standard K31 action, although very few of the parts interchange. A few bits. The cocking knob, the firing pin, the extractor, those small parts interchange. But when it comes to things like the bolt body itself, sights, the front end, the barrels, the furniture, none of those parts are interchangeable because they've all been upgraded or changed to be better for sniping. So the barrel is a very heavy barrel. We have a big old muzzle brake on here. It's kind of interesting. The muzzle brake is actually derived from the German FG-42. The Swiss did a lot of tinkering with those rifles after World War II and took some ideas from them. The stock has been made heavier, and it has this very significant semi-pistol grip here with some good heavy checkering to give you a nice grip on the gun. A big bipod has been added, which we'll look at in a moment. Scope mount obviously has been added. This is a quick detach scope. We'll again take a look at that up close in a moment. And kind of most interesting of all is the whole action has been rotated about 15 degrees clockwise. The reason for that is they wanted to have a center mounted scope because that just simplifies a lot of your aiming and zeroing issues. But this is a rifle fed by a 6-round charger. And typically if you put a center mounted scope, you can't use a stripper clip or a charger clip like that. However, by rotating the whole action, the stripper clip can now actually come in at an angle, clear the center mounted scope, and still work. So let me show you that up close because it's a really neat feature that, as far as I know, no one else has copied. So in order to show you the rotated action, it's actually going to be simpler for me to take the scope off first. Just point out here, this is a 3.5 power magnification scope. It's interesting that through World War II experience, for the guys who aren't like the super duper, lie in a ditch for a week to make a 1-round shot sort of snipers, the more designated marksman sort of style always seems to kind of come back to a 3 to 4 power scope, somewhere in that range. And even the ACOG today is right at 4 power. So the Swiss are no different in that. They went with a 3.5 power. Now we have this plunger button on the back of the scope. If I push that in, that moves our rear lug there, and the scope simply lifts out of its brackets. Now this would go into a metal can issued with the scope to keep it safe. You can see we have 2 big mounting brackets machined into the receiver here. Now, looking at the action, you can see that the cocking knob here is vertical and the action is offset clockwise. So our charger clips go in at an angle and clear the scope. You can see the same thing on the bottom of the rifle here. The magazine goes in at an angle. Now these magazines are marked ZfK for an optical sighted carbine, and they are serial numbered to the guns. I believe these are actually standard K31 magazines. I believe they'll interchange. The triggers on Swiss bolt-action rifles are uniformly very good, but the ZfK-55 trigger is even better. It is an absolutely fantastic trigger. Absolutely no creep in it, and a very, very clean brake. It's really cool to use. Let's take a closer look at our muzzle here. A lot of these features are typical of K31 rifles. We've got our big front iron sight, and you will notice that the actual front sight is in this angled dovetail. The idea here is you can tap it forward or back, and that gives you a very slight adjustment in your windage. So much more precise to adjust it that way than to have it in a horizontal track and try and tap it exactly as far as you want it to go. The muzzle brake is actually pretty decent at reducing felt recoil. Like I said, this is kind of pretty much copied from the German FG42. There is a bayonet lug, which is pretty much just for tradition. I don't know that you'd ever really want to put a bayonet on this thing. It does take standard K31 bayonets though. And allegedly the one potential issue with these rifles in terms of accuracy was the very front end of this muzzle brake is a very small diameter and can potentially, occasionally, cause flyers. Now the reason they did that was so that it would fit the muzzle ring of the bayonet. So one downside of all of this cool stuff, this big heavy barrel and the nice muzzle brake and the scope mount and the bipod, which we'll take a look at in a moment, the downside is weight. This thing is like 5 pounds heavier than a K31. I actually took this one to a scale and measured it, and it came out at 13.5 pounds, which is quite chunky for a rifle that you have to carry around all day. It's great for shooting. That weight alone helps reduce the recoil, makes it a nice steady gun to shoot. But boy, this would get old humping it around every day. All right, lastly, let's take a look at the bipod. In some ways it's cool, and in some ways it's kind of annoying to deal with. The legs are spring-loaded, and they fold out vertical like this. And then the mounting, because it's allowed to be loose, and it's got these scallops in the stock, can pivot quite a bit side to side. So you don't have to be on a perfectly level spot in order to keep the rifle level. That's a good sign. What's less useful is the fact that these legs don't lock in position. They're just held there by spring pressure. All right. So I have to hold the rifle up like this. If I try to rest it on the butt, the legs fold up. And if you try and rest it too far forward, the legs will fold back. They're not actually bending, they're just simply spring-loaded pivot positions. Now, the nice thing about that is it does allow the rifle to be twisted at unusual angles and remain on the bipod feet without bringing them off the ground. The problem is you can't, a lot of folks are used to leaning into or pushing the rifle into the bipod, and you really can't do that with this because it'll just buckle under you. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sniper rifles are always a fun subject to take a look at, and the Swiss ZfK-55 is really one of the best of the bunch. If you would like to own this one yourself, and really, who wouldn't, you can do so. It is, of course, coming up for sale at Rock Island. If you check the description text below, you'll find a link to Rock Island's catalog page on this rifle. You can look at their pictures and their description, and if you decide you can't live without it, place a bid online and do your best to go home with it. Thanks for watching.